to Islamic Events Ramadan Reimagined, a special broadcast with Sister Yasmin Mujahid, answering your questions here today about Ramadan and anything related. We'd love for you to be part to really control today's conversation with Sister Yasmin. So please, down below in the comment section, please send in your questions. Tell us where you're actually watching from, because we'd love to know where our audience is. And Sister Yasmin Mujahid is going to do her best to be able to answer your questions. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Yasmin. How are you? Thank you very much. What time is it there? What time is it over there? Oh, wow. Okay, 𝐁𝐿𝐒𝐏 khair. So good evening to our audience as well. So thank you very much. Thanks for joining us here this evening. Really appreciate your time. Yep. All right, 𝐁𝐿𝐒𝐏 khair. Oh, very, very good. Well, I think everybody probably wants to know, what kind of coffee do you drink? Are you a latte person? Are you a mocha person? What do you like to drink?
Wow, that is an important question. I think definitely a latte person.
Okay, latte. Okay, no worries.
And I know that Australians are very and kind of make fun of American coffee, but I'm going to let that go.
Yeah, well, we're very well renowned for that. So, but that we'll leave that for another day. So, 𝐁𝐿𝐒𝐏 khair. Whilst the questions are starting to pour in, I'll start off probably by, we'll go into Ramadan very, very shortly. I wanted to ask you a question where I think you've said in one of your videos before, I've read, when you look into the Quran, you find your own story, and that's the divine miracle. What's your story in the Quran?
Not personal at all. Wow.
Very easy one to get you started with, right?
That's a bit personal. So wow. How do I go about that? I think that there are kind of universal stories in the Quran that really speak to us. But I think those who have probably gone along this journey with me for a few years would probably already be able to answer that question. That I really resonate with the story of Musa alayhi salam in front of the Red Sea. And I think anyone who's kind of like who's been with me for a bit knows this. But yeah, that story really inspires me personally. It's a story of feeling trapped. It's a story of feeling like there's no way out. It's a story of feeling like things are impossible, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens from places that you never imagined. And it really is a story of tawakkul, of having trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at the same time taking action. And that's something that I find very, very inspiring, but also all-encompassing, because Musa alayhi salam, he had full trust in Allah, but he also took an action when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him to strike the sea with his staff. And so it's a perfect combination of this concept of how a believer should be in a state internally of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but externally and with their actions and with their limbs should be taking the means and always taking action. And that actually is quite relevant as well to the time that we're dealing with right now with the whole COVID-19. That there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of panic right now, and a lot of people are kind of, there's the one side who say, well, maybe we should just go to the masjid, yep, right? And put our trust in Allah, because no harm will come to us except what was written for us. Yes, and while it is true that no harm would come to us except what was written for us, but we are also commanded to take the means. We are also commanded to tie our camel. And in this particular case, it necessitates the social distancing. It necessitates us taking the means, which in this case is washing our hands, trying to stay away from public places, social distancing. And so this is part of our deen as well. And interestingly enough, and I don't know if this is something that we're going to cover later, but since I have an opportunity now, I'm going to talk about it. Sure. If it's okay with you.
That's fine, no problem.
Okay, and that is just kind of as an intro as we're waiting for the questions, and that is that we have a specific narration from the Prophet ﷺ more than 1400 years ago about plague. And that specific narration, the Prophet ﷺ, in that narration, he says that the plague is sent as a punishment for the disbelievers and a mercy for the believers. And he goes on to say that any believer, anyone who responds to a plague with these conditions, and there are certain conditions, and interestingly enough, the first condition is basically social isolation. It is social distancing. The Prophet ﷺ said not to leave that land, not to leave your land for another land, not to we're not supposed to leave the land of or leave the land of plague or enter a land of plague. In other words, we're supposed to stay put, which is exactly what we're being told to do. That shelter in place, the social distancing, this is something that our Prophet, peace be upon him, said to us more than 1400 years ago. And this was the first, this was, in the hadith, the condition of how to get the reward. So the first condition is to stay put. The second condition is sabr, is to have patience. And that's its own entire lecture of what that looks like right now, what sabr looks like right now. But I hope that inshallah it will come through the questions. But then the third is the full realization that nothing will come to us except what was written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if a person has all three requirements, then they will get the reward of a martyr. Now that is intense, because one of the commentators, Ibn Hajar, mentioned that nowhere in the hadith does it say that the person has to die of the plague to get the reward of martyr. In fact, it is those three conditions which every single one of us, whether we even contract COVID-19 or not, whether we live or we die, we can still get the reward of martyr as long as we fulfill those three conditions. So that's truly a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
All right, Jazakallah khair. Let's see if we can combine a couple of those themes, the story of Musa alayhi salam and with sabr. So there is a sense of, I know with my friends and what I've been able to note of like family, as well as what you read online and what's broadcast from the media, is that there is a sense of despair. People genuinely feel despondent, feel disconnected from other people this Ramadan. And as a result of that, what we're seeing is that people are not immersed as much as they could be or would have been into Ramadan, where it's just really counting down the days. A week has already transpired and has already gone by. What advice could you give us who currently that's how we're feeling?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think that was really echoed in the video that was made as well by Islamic Events. Yeah. That sentiment that you just explained. I think you're right. It's quite a universal sentiment that but we can't really make the most of Ramadan because we don't have access to these things. And I think that actually there's a lot of wisdom in the situation we're put in right now. Of course, we can never claim to know Allah's wisdom. Allah knows best, but from what we can in our limited knowledge observe is that there is some hikmah here, and just a few of the wisdoms is that, number one, this is something that my teacher was saying, is that if you look at all the ahadith, if you look at all the narrations about Ramadan and about the reward of Ramadan. Now, if we take each one, and for example, the hadith that says that anyone who fasts Ramadan, iman wa hisab, and that in believing and with expectation and hope from Allah for that reward, then all of their sins will be forgiven. Whoever stands in qiyam, whoever witnesses the Laylatul Qadr, all of these three. Now let's look at these three: the fasting, along with iman and hope in Allah's reward, the qiyam, the witnessing and the worship in Laylatul Qadr. Are any three of these taken away from us? Have we been deprived of any three of these? And the answer is no. Allah has still allowed us to fast. Allah has still allowed us to do qiyam, and Allah has still allowed us to witness Laylatul Qadr. And so in fact, we are not being deprived per se of these worships. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, all of the actual worships that we're supposed to be doing in Ramadan, we are not deprived of. The Quran, we still have it in our homes. We are able to fast. Allah has given us life. That's another thing we need to be very grateful, because we were given life and ability to fast when others do not have that. We were given the life and the ability to fast. We were given the ability to still pray qiyam, to still witness the Laylatul Qadr. And so in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not deprived us of the ability to make the most of this Ramadan. And perhaps there is a lesson in this, and that is, we should not become dependent upon things outside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our deen, if that makes sense. So for example,
Sure.
We may not be able to pray in the masjid, Taraweeh, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us anywhere. We can call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from our homes. We can call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the highest mountain or the lowest valley. We can pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anywhere. In fact, the entire earth is a masjid, if you really go into it. And so, technically, right? Of course, praying in our home, it's not technically the same as praying in the masjid. However, when this is because of the command of Allah, when this is because of the decision of Allah, this is the qadr of Allah. This isn't me deciding, Boris Johnson deciding, or Trump deciding. This is actually the decision of Allah. And therefore, it means that when we submit to the decision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it actually always ends up becoming better for us in that situation. And that's because Allah knows best. But those are just some examples of how, in fact, we are not being deprived of the essence of Ramadan. If the essence of Ramadan was just community iftars and Taraweeh, then maybe, perhaps, we need to reorient and refocus on the actual essence of Ramadan, which, as the Prophet ﷺ told us, it is in the fasting, it is in the prayer, which we can do individually. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ prayed the qiyam of Ramadan at home. The Prophet ﷺ did not actually pray the qiyam of Ramadan communally, because he didn't want it for people to think it was fard. So these are all things that we do, yes, to support one another, but that isn't actually the essence of Ramadan. And most of all, as you mentioned at the beginning, we have the Quran. We have access to the Quran, and that is not dependent upon being at the masjid.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. Very, very good. So I'm gonna dive a little bit into that. So let's move away from the despondency and despair, and now let's look at potentially 30 days from now, right? Because one of the things I've been reflecting on, Yasmin, this Ramadan is COVID-19 and what's taking place the real test, or is the real test when COVID-19 is allayed and we move past this? And what I mean by the real test is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tested us now, and we're just trying to respond. But is the real test to say, okay, all these habits, all this, you returning to me and worship me again and making the family unit, central to your life, are you going to keep these habits, or are you going to return, right, to what you were doing before? Or so I think, how do you view that? Does that make sense? That the real test, yes, potentially after we move past COVID-19? Is that really the test of whether we return back to mediocrity, return back to bad habits, we return back to not making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Quran and our prayer in our home central?
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, there are different parts of the test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He, there's this ayah in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that Allah, sometimes He sends a lesser punishment before the greater punishment. And when you look at what, first of all, what is a lesser punishment? What's a greater punishment? And why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do that? So Allah says He sends a lesser punishment before the greater punishment. So this is al-adhab al-asghar dun al-adhab al-akbar. So the adab, the torment, basically the lesser torment before the greater torment. And he says that the reason he does that, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ, in order for them to come back. So we see here that Allah is his intent. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants is that we would use this lesser punishment, or this lesser sort of difficulty, in order as a wake-up call before the greater punishment, and so that we do come back to him. And so yes, in fact, a lot of people are asking this question: is this a punishment? Is Allah angry with us?
I've got a question for you on that. Yep.
Okay, great. So I bet that's probably about 75 of the questions. So
I'm telling you, they're coming in. So can I, if you don't mind, apologies. Why don't I use that as a segue?
Yes, go ahead.
So,
go ahead.
Sister Iqbal, I think, from Malaysia, is asking, do you think the current situation is down to us as an ummah neglecting our brothers and sisters around the world who are being persecuted and killed? And have we become desensitized to their plights?
Very interesting. So along those lines, we can't know why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does a specific thing other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in his own words. Right. And in the Quran, as I mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that sometimes he sends these lesser torments or these lesser difficulties before the greater punishment in order for us to come back. So what is it that we need to do to come back? Well, it may perhaps be that we need to wake up and be more compassionate and be more of service to others, of, as you said, caring about the plight of others. So for each individual, it might be different. And as an ummah, there's something that we need to do collectively, and there's things that we need to do individually. But the point here is that it's not really about trying to figure out why Allah does what he does. What our focus should be is, what's my response? Yep. Our focus should be, what do I need to change? And so the sister makes a very good point. Is it perhaps that we have been too apathetic to the plight of others? Well, there's a very easy way to solve that. And that is, let's stop being apathetic, right? We don't need to sit and wonder, well, is that the reason? Because here's potentially what can happen, and what's happening, I think, a lot, is that a person can become so paralyzed by trying to figure out divine wisdom, but they don't actually do anything. Yes, you can actually exert and in fact waste all of your energy in intellectual exercises, right? Trying to figure out, but if Allah means this, then he would have done this, but maybe Allah means this, but maybe that's not our job. Our job is not to figure out God and figure out why God does what he does, essentially. Yep. Our only job is to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it is relevant for our ibadah, for our ubudiyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our job is to figure out, what does this mean for me, and how I need to respond, and how I need to fix my own self and my own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with the creation. And it is both. All right, it is both. The answer has to be both parts.
All right, 𝐁𝐿𝐴 khair. So why don't we chunk down a little bit on that? So I want to fix my connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I really want to, I'm hearing what you're saying, Sister Yasmin. You're really saying, look, Tariq, focus on the things that you can control, because everything outside you can't. And there is a wisdom as to why it's happening. So rather than get caught in analysis paralysis, I just want you to focus on what you're doing. And here I am. I want to reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I really do. But I don't know how. I've sinned too much. I've erred too much. Like, how do I do it? Like, how do I really try to reconnect with my Creator? And how do I know He's even accepting? How do I even know? I mean, I can't see Him. I can't communicate with Him. How do I even know?
Okay, great questions. People are asking great questions. Alhamdulillah. So first of all, how do I reconnect? And then the second is, how do I know I have been successful in reconnecting? I think that's kind of the two-part question. First, how do I reconnect? I think there's a huge shift that we need to make. Okay, I think many of us have the wrong focus. Now, listen carefully.
Okay.
I think many of us, when it comes to worship, our focus is on how I feel. Okay, my focus is on how does it feel for me? What's my experience? Am I reaching a spiritual high? Am I feeling it? You know, it's like all about how I feel. That's the wrong focus. It is actually not about you. It is actually not about me. It's about God. Now, that's like a completely different paradigm. It's not about how we feel. It's about what Allah deserves from us. So let me ask you this question. Imagine that when you start praying, or maybe one Ramadan, you started praying and you were feeling an incredible high. You know, you were feeling all the verses, you were really feeling that Ramadan, you were in a spiritual. Every time you prayed, you felt higher and higher and higher. Now, what happens when all of a sudden you don't feel that high anymore? You don't feel your prayer anymore. You're not having that feeling anymore. So what now? Do you stop praying? Do you stop praying? So this is the problem. Imagine that you're reading Quran and you're just getting such a high from it. You're just like, it's making you cry. It's really touching you. And then all of a sudden, it's not giving you that high anymore. Do you stop reading Quran? And this is exactly the problem, is that I think so many of us are actually attached to the spiritual highs. We're attached to how it makes me feel. And for many of us, just be honest, we're missing our spiritual highs from being able to listen to Quran in these masajid recited so beautifully, and it made us feel good, right? But if you actually go back and you look at the reward itself, the reward is not necessarily dependent on how it makes you feel. It's only dependent on, did we do it right and did Allah accept? So this is very important. Our focus needs to shift from how does it make me feel to am I doing it right and is Allah accepting? And so how do we do it right? Well, we have to look at the Sunnah. We have to look at the Quran and the Sunnah to make sure we're doing it right when it comes to ibadah. And the question then becomes only, is Allah accepting? Whether or not I'm feeling it, whether or not it makes me have a spiritual high. A lot of people just use spirituality as another drug, you know?
Yes,
it's like, it's just another high. And
Yep.
unfortunately, that's a very popular thing we have now with, you know, meditation and mindfulness and whatever. I mean, that's all great, but what are we actually chasing? Are we chasing a higher power? Well, in those cases, in the secular sense, we're actually just chasing a high. We just want to feel good. And there's nothing wrong with feeling good. And by the way, as a consequence and a gift of ibadah, you will feel good. But you cannot be worshiping the spiritual high. And whether or not you have it, it determines whether or not you're going to continue. So our shift has to, you know, the focus has to shift from what I feel to am I doing it right and is Allah accepting? And when we shift that way, we will continue to do what is asked of us, whether or not we feel it, whether or not we like it, whether or not it's making me feel this or that.
Okay.
And then finally, the question of how do I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is accepted? Well, first and foremost, we need to have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to have a positive opinion of Allah. We need to do our best and then have hope that it is accepted. But one sign that our actions are accepted, that our worship is accepted, is the fact that we're continuing to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is, in fact, the greatest gift. You know, there's this saying that the best karama is istiqama. The best, you know, spiritual gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ability to continue steadfast in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you find that you are able to be consistent in the ibadah, in your ubudiyyah, then that's a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has accepted you and is pleased with you, because that's the greatest honor, is to be abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. I've got some I've got a very parochial local crowd that are insisting that I ask you a couple of questions. So I've got one from London, England, and I've got one from Sydney. So Brother Mezen is asking, talking about feeling it and not feeling it. He's asking, when it comes to our children, in particular around teenagers who are not feeling Ramadan, are not feeling the spirit, are more feeling in tune with their laptops, their iPads, their computers, etc., etc. Given that we've got this opportunity, this very, very unique Ramadan, how can I make them feel this connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or foster this connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What tips do you have around that?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I think the best way, and first and foremost, is to try to foster a connection to the Quran. This is the month of the Quran, and the Quran is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to us. So I think the focus should be trying to build a relationship between our children, our families, and the Quran. So different ways of doing that depending on the age of the children, of course. And there are, alhamdulillah, now that we've gone online, there are countless resources online. Like, you know, there's like every hour you have an option of 3 different live, webinars, mashallah, all free. So it's a great resource right now, everything online. So looking for something that's age appropriate, that will foster that relationship with the words of Allah. Depending on where that child is at, you would find something appropriate.
Sure.
But I think that the focus should be the Quran and building a relationship with the Quran, having Quran halaqas as a family, listening to lectures, having Quran played with these beautiful recitations at home, and allowing the child make a habit out of turning to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and building a relationship with it.
Yeah, so if I can further then continue on that, how Sister Yasmin, I think the question that parents, I know I've got a 13-year-old, okay, and it's like, I can just imagine here, and hello, I'm sure I'm going to get some grief as soon as I get home, but I can just imagine him rolling his eyes when it's like, okay, let's go and read a page, or let's read a couple of verses, or let's talk about something. How do we go about imbuing, if you like, imbuing that I don't know, love, connection with the Quran? How do we do that as parents? Because it's an absolute challenge.
Absolutely. Well, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of teachers out there who are resources for us, and that's the beauty of having the teachers and having the shuyukh, and those resources. I'd say tap into those, because this is a blessing that we have, that people who do this for a living, really, of teaching the Quran in a way that is that connects to youth, that connects to children. I would definitely look into those. I mean, there's, just off the top of my head, there are many institutes that are having Quran reflections online. You have Yaqeen, you have Qalam, you have Quran Weekly, etc. There's a lot out there that are specifically looking at, and they do these short sort of reflections about the Quran, and they're done in a way that's very engaging. And then there's, of course, different ones for younger children as well.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So I'm going to digress for a moment, and I'll come to a couple of questions people have. Can I ask you to speak to something that I know you're very, very passionate about? I know, just going on to your Instagram page, Ramadan, you talk about things that we can control and how I can connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do khair this month. You are very, very passionate at the moment about a particular cause where people can get involved, and something that we take for granted every day. Right? I'll let you speak to this particular, but I want to give you that opportunity, please, to speak to our global audience about that particular cause, maybe raise some awareness around it, and what can people do to be able to assist and to help during this month of mercy and full of reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's something genuinely every day. I know in particular here in Australia, maybe other countries around the world, absolutely, we just really take for granted.
Absolutely. Yes, you are absolutely right. I was actually astounded myself when I read some of these statistics. So one thing that I've noticed is that, as this COVID-19 pandemic and all that this crisis unfolds, I think every day many of us are looking at the death toll. We're looking at, okay, this many people died today, this many people, have it. And one thing that really shocked me is when I read about another silent killer that is actually killing more people every single day. So more than 4,000 people are dying every single day globally from unsafe water. And as you said, we totally take it for granted. I just have to walk, 2 feet over there.
Yep.
And it's a kitchen, and I have a sink, and I have clean water, and then I have to walk a few more feet and I have filtered water, in my fridge. And this is something that many of us have, and we absolutely take for granted. And it isn't just a luxury. This is the problem, is that not having clean water is in fact it's a killer. It is something that's killing more people every single day than this pandemic. And so we feel powerless about what's happening with COVID-19. But what I was amazed to find out is that we're actually not powerless to help stop this killer. And just by supporting these organizations that go into these villages and into these underprivileged areas and give them clean water.
Yes.
Access to clean water and proper sanitation. And just doing that. And by the way, this was also a statistic that blew my mind. And these statistics are from the World Health Organization, is that out of these more than 4,000, I think it was like 4,800 or something per day that are dying from unsafe water, more than 90% are children. More than 90% are under the age of 5. And so unlike COVID-19, it was interesting when I posted these statistics, I had such an influx of people saying that's not true. COVID-19. I'm not talking about COVID-19. I'm talking about unsafe water. Yeah. That unsafe water is killing children. And here we are. We're just so focused on COVID-19. But as we speak, this is something that is killing children predominantly under the age of 5. And it is something that we can actually do something about. And that's what amazed me, is that you and I and every single person can actually do something to change this, and we can stop these deaths. And so what I've done is I've started working with this project of Muslim Aid, and what we're doing is we're collecting funds in order to provide safe water, in order to provide proper sanitations for these places. And the other thing to keep in mind is this is zakah eligible, and so we all inshallah need to pay our zakah. It's one of the 5 pillars, we got to do it. And this is an opportunity to direct our zakah to a place where not only are we going to save lives, but watch this, it actually is going to come back to us in our graves. And that's because this is an example of a sadaqah jariyah. This is a charity that continues to benefit others. And so it's one of those in the category of the deeds that will come back to us in our grave. So what I've done is I've put, there's a link to support this cause on my Instagram bio. I've also posted it on Facebook, and inshallah we'll post it, I think, in the comments if possible for this video.
Sure.
But this is an absolutely worthy cause that is actually going to not only save lives, but it can actually save you, because it is not only can it be part of your zakah, but it also can come back to you in your grave as a sadaqah jariyah, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. And folks, we'll do exactly that. We'll, in the video after this is complete, and again, we thank Sister Yasmin for joining us. We'll put the link up on Islamic Events Facebook page. Speaking of, I'm going to go back to the theme of, no problem, the theme of pandemic. Sister Faye, and I can't pronounce the city, I'm trying to look up where it is, so excuse me for this, I'll get it in a moment, is asking if this pandemic, when this pandemic is over, or as a result of us moving past this, what is the most important lesson that you would like to share from your reflections thus far that you would want Muslims to really consider, in particular when you spoke earlier about that paradigm shift that we now need to have as a result of what is taking place to us?
I think one of the biggest lessons of this pandemic is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge. I think it's a lesson of Allah's power. Um, I think it's so humbling, the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't need to send an earthquake or an army or an asteroid, as my teacher said. It's an invisible, microscopic virus, and it has brought nations to their knees. It has destroyed economies. It has kept us at home when we want to be outside the home. I mean, it is really a manifestation of Allah's qahr. Allah is al-qahhar. Allah is the one who subdues. When Allah makes a decision, there is nothing you or I or the most powerful or the richest in the world can do about it. And I really think it's a lesson in humility for us. I think many of us and many nations have become very arrogant, thinking that they are self-sufficient, thinking that they're in control. And this microscopic creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has shown the world that, in fact, they are not in control. And no one, for example, when we ask the simple question, when will things reopen?
Yeah.
Who can answer that question? Nobody. One can even answer that question. When are the flights gonna resume to such and such place? Or when are the jobs, when are the businesses gonna open? And they can't answer that question. Why? Because we are Bani Adam, we are human beings, we are weak, we are limited, we don't know the unseen. We can't even, if a person gets infected, God forbid, by COVID-19, they can't even see it. It's in the ghaib. It's completely unseen. We are completely at the mercy of the unseen. So it's a wake-up call for anyone with sense to realize that we are not in charge, that we are not in control, that there is a higher power, and we should humble ourselves. This absolute arrogance that unfortunately we as human beings sometimes get lost in. So I think that's really one of the biggest lessons, is that we are in complete need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He is the most powerful. And la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, in a nutshell, right? There is no change in state, and there is no power or might except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. I'm going to finish off with two last questions. One comes from, okay, hang on for a second. We've got one now from Philippines and France. They're starting to pour in, Sister Yasmin. So I'm going to get in trouble. So
that's fine. We'll allow a few more minutes.
Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. So on that particular point, Sister Susan Kadri from London, on that particular point that you've spoken about, as in, with everything that's taken place, this is a great moment for humanity and for us as individuals, for introspection, and to really understand that all the power comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that the lesson that we need to remember is exactly that. So I guess a very general question that's come through from Sister Suzanne, which you probably receive all the time, but in light of the global pandemic, how can I still take away what you've just said, but still enjoy parts of the dunya, right? How can I do both?
Wow, amazing question. I think that we can, in fact, only enjoy the dunya when we recognize Allah's power. Yeah. So it's quite ironic that the true peace, there is no other peace. There is no other sanctuary. There is no other place to find rest except in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if we want security, what are we looking for right now, right? I mean, what's at the essence of your question, right? The essence right now of what we're looking for is security, peace, not having to feel panicked or afraid. That's what we're looking. That's probably our number one priority right now, because that's what has been, that's what feels like has been taken away. Where does that exist? That peace and that security only exists in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so ironically, it is only by acknowledging and recognizing Allah as Al-Qahhar and then submitting to that. And only by recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power can we actually find inner peace. And can we actually find security? Because think about it like this, right? If I have now had to face my own mortality and my own fragility, the fact that I am fragile, the fact that at any moment an unseen thing could kill me, right? I mean, that's scary to think about.
Yep.
If I'm having to face that my own, that vulnerability of being human, so then where am I going to find security and where am I going to find peace? Having recognized my own mortality, and that is in something that is not mortal, in something immortal, in something that is infinite, in something that is not limited, but is actually all powerful. And so, in fact, the answer to your question is that it is by acknowledging and turning to something more powerful that I find security when I feel powerless. And I realize that my own powerlessness.
𝐁𝐿𝐒𝐒 𝐈𝐍𝐶𝐒𝐒. Well, that's a great point, because then here we've got Sister Nadia from Johannesburg, South Africa, and she's asking the following question, and I'm just going to see if I can surmise. So you're speaking about returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as a result of the pandemic that's causing, because of the speculations, it's causing a lot of anxiety. Sometimes we forget about a tool in our arsenal, if you like, in our toolkit, that is probably very, very underused. And I think it's underused for a couple of reasons. I'll tell you what that is in a moment. We don't know how to use it properly. We don't know whether it really can make a difference. And then both of those things lead me to think, you know what, I'll just focus on other ibadah. And that tool, which Sister Nadia is speaking, and I'm paraphrasing, is dua. How do I use the power of dua this Ramadan, through this pandemic, me feeling anxious, despondent, wanting to reconnect with Allah? Sister Yasmin, how do we use dua right now to really connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do we do that?
Absolutely, and it's great that you remind us of that, because dua is the weapon of the believer, and dua is, in one hadith the Prophet ﷺ said that dua huwa al-ibadah, in another hadith ad-dua mukh al-ibadah, that dua is worship. And so a huge part of why it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us, why Allah gives us difficulty, is so that we will turn to Him in humility and ask. And so that is actually the right answer. The right answer is to turn to Allah and to ask Allah. So we should be increasing in our dua, as that is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. That's one of the objectives of calamity and difficulty, is so that we'll turn back to Allah and ask from Him. One of the words in the Quran that Allah uses is لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَضَرَّعُونَ, in order for them to have a state of tadarru'. And tadarru' is like this humility, this turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not like I got this kind of attitude, but in, yeah, Allah help me, I need you, I'm absolutely desperate for your need. That's one of the objectives of difficulty. So that's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do, and that's something that can save us. That's something that can save us and our families in times of hardship, and to prevent and protect us from calamity. I mean, this is one of the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ that he teaches us. There are many adhkar and many du'as, but a huge percentage of them are about making du'a for protection against difficulty, against calamity, so this is part of our tradition, is that we should use du'a in order to protect us and our families.
Yeah, and so on that, and before I ask you the final question, and we'll wrap up, and 𝐁𝐿𝐒𝐒 𝐶𝐒 again, how do I know it's working? Like, I'm asking, I really am asking. I know I've been told to think the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you told me. I need to have this conception of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? A very, very positive, optimistic conception of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Sister Yasmin, like I'm getting up before suhoor, I'm making the dua, just before I break my iftar, I'm making my dua, you know, in my own room when nobody's seeing me, but I don't know if it's reaching Allah, I don't know if He's accepting it, like how do I know He is, and how do I know whether I should continue to do it or not?
Okay, well, great question. Again, I'm going to ask us to shift the focus.
Okay.
Let's shift the focus for a moment from the answer of the dua
Yes.
to the process of making dua.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So
Great.
watch this. So watch this, right? I'm going to give you a scenario. Imagine that a person, you know, they see a Ferrari and they're like, man, I want that Ferrari. You know,
Yep.
I just want a Ferrari. They're just obsessed with it. Okay, so understood. Analogy understood.
Yep.
And so what they do is they say, okay, I know that Allah hears the du'as, especially at tahajjud time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my alarm and I'm going to wake up every single day before Fajr, and I am going to get my head to the ground. I'm going to make sajda. I'm going to pray tahajjud, and I am going to beg Allah for a Ferrari. And this individual does this 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, months, and then a year. So 1 full year, this person is praying tahajjud, yeah, waking up and crying to Allah. I mean, maybe they just really want this Ferrari, right? So they're making dua for that Ferrari. Now, at the end of that year, whether or not they got the Ferrari, like imagine they never got it. Like
Right.
they never got it in this life. You know, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always answers the dua. He'll give us something, either give us what we're asking for, give us something, you know, better than it, something in exchange, or something, you know, protect us from something maybe in the hereafter, always answered in some form. But imagine they don't actually get the Ferrari in this life. But what have they gotten that is better than the Ferrari? That for 1 year, they built a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And it is the act of dua itself that is better than possibly what you're asking for. Because when you call out to Allah, and this is why the hadith is saying, ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah, is that it's the act of making dua that is the ibadah, it is the worship, that you calling on Allah, do it with humility. That in and of itself is what is bringing you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and strengthening the bond with the Creator. And that is more valuable than the Ferrari or anything like it. And so this is something that, you know, many of us can relate to when we've gone through difficult times. You know, you might have gone through that time. Maybe someone was sick. Maybe you had a problem financially. You know, you had a relationship issue, whatever it was, and it made you turn to Allah in total need and beg from Allah. So it basically allowed you to taste dua, right? And in that process, what happened? Well, you can probably recognize that it was that process. Hey, during that time, I got closer to Allah. That was actually the time when I was closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when I went through that difficulty. Yeah. And regardless of what happened with that difficulty, whether or not the exact thing you asked for was given or not, but what you got regardless is that you built a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that relationship is priceless, and it is even better than the outcome potentially of what it was that you were asking for. And one thing I want to just also, before we close, because we've been talking about you know, we've been talking about punishment and calamities and dua and, you know,
pandemics,
you know, how that all fits, and pandemics, and how that all fits in our you know, within the context of Ramadan and dua. So I want to just give you some text of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger have told us are things that we can do to actually protect ourselves and our families from calamity. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to be protected. As the sister said, we want to enjoy our life. We don't want to be in difficulty. And this is something we're told by Allah and His Messenger, you know, that the Prophet ﷺ would ask for ease. Okay, and he told us to ask for afwan afiya, well-being. And so what are some things that we can do to protect ourselves from calamity? One of the things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that protects nations from, or protects people individually and collectively from calamity, is istighfar. That he said that, as long as that if a nation is always cleaning themselves, purifying themselves through repentance, through istighfar, then that is a protection from calamity. The second way is through gratitude. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in one ayah, He says that when we are grateful, وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, that when you are grateful, Allah increases you. So one of the ways to not only hold on to your blessings, to protect your blessings, but to even increase your blessings is through the practice of gratitude, of being grateful for your blessings. The other is that when you're grateful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's also a protection from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or from calamity. And then the other, finally, and this is one that I've spoken about, previously on this webinar, and that is through sadaqah. Yes. And interestingly enough, I mentioned a few of the benefits of, for example, helping with this water project that I mentioned, is that it actually, not only is it saving other people's lives, and not only can it be your fard of zakah, but it actually is benefiting you in your grave. And this is the other benefit, is that the Prophet ﷺ said that charity, it extinguishes the wrath and anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it protects people from a bad ending. And so one of the things that we can do to actually protect ourselves and our families from difficulty, from calamity, is sadaqah. Sadaqah is very, very powerful in terms of allowing ourselves to live a good life. And this was a question asked: how can we live a good life? How can we live a protected life? That's all we want, right? We want to be happy. We want to be protected. We want to be safe. We want this for ourselves and for others. And so through sadaqah, we are able to not only protect others, but also protect ourselves. And so this is one of the best ways to have that protection. And all the things that we want is actually being in the service of others. And that's something I also want lesson from this whole test that we're going through, the pandemic. And the first and foremost was the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other one I want to add to that is the lesson of compassion for others, service for others, not being selfish. I think this is a theme that unfortunately we were seeing throughout the world, is that some people were sort of having this knee-jerk reaction of selfishness and hoarding, keeping for oneself and leaving nothing for others. And that's something that we have to be very careful not to do, because when we serve others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to us. And this is a theme we have to remember. This is a great time to really build on that and to embody that concept, especially in Ramadan, is the theme of service, the theme of charity, of helping others in need. And we're told again and again and again that when you help another person in need, Allah helps you when you are in need.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you, Sister Yasmin. What an apt way of being able to wrap up. Thank you very, very much. I know I have to look into the camera, but you're actually to my right, so I just want to be able to wave and say Jazakallah khair. So that's what's happening. Can I just say thank you? Can I just say thank you very much to everybody out there? Thanks for allowing us to come into your homes this evening, this afternoon, and this morning, wherever you are around the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the remaining part of your Ramadan. Please do make the most of it. I think there was pearls of wisdom here that Sister Yasmin has shared, and we'll put up the video about focusing on what you can control, returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, think optimistically of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She's given us some practical steps on what we can do in using dua, istighfar, etc., to be able to not only make the most of this Ramadan, but also post this Ramadan to be able to come out of it. And this is one of the signs of an accepted Ramadan, that you come out of Ramadan better, or incrementally better than what you actually went into it, inshallah. So Jazakallah khair, thank you very much. There's a couple of people that I need to recognize that have made today possible. So one, I want to be able to talk about the organization that Sister Yasmin is talking about when it comes to this very, very not only worthwhile cause, but a cause that is imperative that we all get behind. So please, on Sister Yasmin's Facebook, on her Instagram, you'll find the link, and we'll also put up the link. Please get behind this. Again, we really take it for granted. We genuinely do. And I know this is one of the topics that both Muslims and non-Muslims feel very passionately about in the philanthropic field, about really just wanting to bring, you would say, a human right. You know, you'd go as far as saying a human right to have access to clean water. So please do get behind it. That's the first thing. The second thing is I want to say thank you very much to the tech crew at 𝐒𝐿E TV here in Sydney. Please do look them up on Facebook. They've allowed us to come into their studio, and they've been able to technically put us in contact with Sister Yasmin. Not easy, but I really do appreciate it. Thirdly, Sister Yasmin, 𝐁𝐿𝐒 𝐈𝐍𝐶𝐒𝐒, thank you to your family. I know it's 11 o'clock at night. Depending on how many coffees you've had, will be pending when you actually go to sleep, right? And we invite you again to come and visit us here in Sydney, where we will show you what real coffee is all about. So please
see, there it is. There's that Australian.
Yeah, that's the Australianness in us, but yeah, we're fine. And I'll leave you on that note. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the remaining part of your Ramadan. Eid Mubarak to you and your family. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much. And Assalamu alaikum.
جزاك الله خير وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.